That was Danny Boy speaking on Biggie's alleged killer, a man who for years felt more like a ghost story than a real person. But now, that mystery man has finally stepped out of the shadows and confessed on the record. And yes, he didn't hold back. He revealed who paid him, why it happened, and exactly how it all went down. In open court, with reporters watching and lawyers frozen in shock, he stood up, apologized, and then dropped the bomb. He said he was hired. Before we dive into that explosive confession, we need to rewind to Biggie's final 48 hours, because what he said and did in those last moments ties straight into what we now know. March 5th, 1997, San Francisco, Biggie was on the Doghouse radio show with JV and Elvis, cracking jokes, clearly tired but still in good spirits. Then, out of nowhere, he said something chilling, and he tried to laugh it off, but you could hear it. He was stressed. That stress wasn't just nerves. Biggie had just finished Life After Death and was running himself thin, promoting it across the country. He'd been deeply shaken by Tupac's killing and had a real fear that he might be next. He even admitted it during that same interview. And this wasn't just a vibe, it was real. On March 8th, Biggie showed up at the Soul Train Music Awards in LA. People said he looked relaxed, even hopeful that the beef between East and West was dying down. In a separate interview, Biggie said he was over the drama, but not everybody wanted peace. That night, Vibe magazine threw a massive party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. By midnight, it was wall-to-wall with celebrities and security. Around 12:30 a.m., the fire marshal shut it down for overcrowding. As the crowd spilled into the streets, Puff Daddy's SUV led the way. Biggie followed close behind in a green Chevy Suburban with Lil Cease, G-Money, and his security D-Rock. Then, red lights, silence, and suddenly gunfire. Lil Cease later described the chaos in raw detail.
A car just rolled up, started popping in the car. Didn't say nothing.
Everyone ducked, people were running, but Biggie's door jammed. He couldn't get out. He was hit 4 times. 1 bullet struck his heart. At the hospital, Gene Deal yanked Biggie from the SUV and screamed at Puff, "He's dead!" Nobody wanted to believe it, but it was true. Christopher Wallace, son, husband, rap icon, was gone. And that's when things took a dark turn. A task force led by former LAPD detective Greg Kading was put together to investigate Biggie's murder. For years, there were dead ends, lawsuits, and silence. But finally, Kading came forward with some heavy claims. There were names, there were witnesses, and one person had been given immunity.
I think Poochie was involved. I think Suge Knight orchestrated it through his, at the time, girlfriend / baby mama. I do believe Poochie was directly involved.
Kading said the trigger man was Wardell Poochie Faust, an alleged Bloods member linked to Suge Knight. Poochie had a violent history, but the real shocker? Kading said Suge's girlfriend, who allegedly arranged the hit, got full immunity in exchange for information. This deal was never made public until Kading spilled it after retiring. And still, the case went nowhere. Kading claimed Suge was too slick. He never left fingerprints on the plot. The immunity? Wasted. But this year, everything changed. In a courtroom packed with press, a man came forward. Not just a witness, but someone who helped plan the hit. He stood up and said the words that stopped the room cold. "I'm sorry. I killed Biggie." He explained how he was paid by someone close to Suge Knight. He described the exact car, time, weapons. He even knew that Lil Cease had been hollering at girls out the window just before the bullets flew. That's not something a random person could have guessed. He said the murder wasn't even about the East Coast versus West Coast war. It was personal. Biggie was just collateral. The confession forced investigators to re-examine everything. Even Biggie's mom, Valletta Wallace, had long believed there was a deeper cover-up. She spent millions suing the LAPD, accusing them of being tied to Suge Knight and death row. Official court documents backed up parts of her claims, but her case was shut down, not because it lacked facts, but because the LAPD refused to settle. Drained and heartbroken, she had to walk away. And now, with a confession this raw, this direct, everything is back on the table. But that didn't mean Valletta Wallace was done, not even close. Years later, she sat across from Greg Kading, the same former LAPD detective who cracked open the long-frozen case. Kading said she wasn't bitter, she wasn't angry, she carried herself with quiet power. There was just something about her, he recalled. She wasn't after revenge, she just wanted the truth. And after that courtroom confession, she might finally be getting it. But what was Biggie thinking in those final hours? His last ever radio interview might hold the answer. It's been buried for years, almost forgotten. But now, it's haunting. In that interview, Biggie talked like a man who knew eyes were on him. He said things that now hit completely different. He spoke of feeling hunted, watched, and he dropped a line nobody noticed at the time.
You gotta mature until something may happen to you, like you going to jail or you catching a case or somebody trying to do something to you.
It sounds like a warning from a man who sensed something creeping up fast. He knew trouble was close. He just didn't know how soon. And here's where it gets even darker. The man who just confessed in court wasn't working alone. According to investigators, 2 other people involved in the hit are still out there, free. Next up, we dig into the dirty money conspiracy, the payment, the setup, and the prison call Suge Knight made that no one was supposed to hear. Audio tapes the public's never heard. Conversations that cracked this thing wide open. Welcome to the Blood Money Trail. Who really paid to have Biggie killed? In the streets, there's always been one rule: keep the money clean and the lips sealed. But when Biggie was assassinated, that silence finally broke. And behind it wasn't a turf war or a revenge hit. This wasn't about coast versus coast. This was about business, cold, calculated business. Biggie's death was a murder for hire, clean cut, paid in full. And the trail? It starts with one shady prison phone call made shortly after Biggie was gunned down on March 9th, 1997. Suge Knight, already locked up for a probation violation, was still pulling strings. And those calls weren't just to his legal team. He was contacting people on the outside, people with real reach. One of those names, Wardell Poochie Faust, the alleged shooter named by Greg Kading's LAPD task force. According to witness testimony uncovered later, Sugie communicated with Poochie through his girlfriend, who acted as the middlewoman. And yes, she's the same woman who was granted full legal immunity. Greg Kading dropped that detail years later. Suga's girlfriend cut a deal. And the FBI, they found a suspicious bank transfer that just happened to go through the day after Biggie's murder. Now here's where it gets slick. It wasn't in Suga's name, but the account, it belonged to someone deep in Suga's inner circle. You don't need DNA when you've got wire transfers, motive, and connections. And according to Kading, Suge saw Biggie's death as a twisted message. Just because Tupac was gone didn't mean the game was over. The creepiest part, Suge wasn't even subtle about it. He never outright admitted anything, but audio from prison and old interviews show a man speaking in code, smirking, hinting, gloating. He talked about revenge and balance without saying the words directly. In one leaked deposition, when asked if he knew who killed Biggie, Suge answered, "Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Ask Puff." That line shook everyone, but Puff Daddy, now Diddy, has always maintained he had nothing to do with it and that he was simply mourning a friend. Still, not everyone bought that clean-cut story. Security insiders like Gene Deal, who was with Puff and Biggie that night, claimed something else was going on. Deal said Puff was warned ahead of time that LA was too hot, that Biggie didn't even want to go to the Soul Train Awards, but Puff pushed for it anyway. Deal didn't see just grief in Puff afterward, he saw trauma, maybe even guilt. He claimed that after Biggie's death, Puff started cutting ties with people who'd been there that night. Not just emotionally, but financially too, especially the security team that later helped police. Puff allegedly iced them out. But let's zoom in. What really went down inside that Suburban? According to Lil Cease, who was sitting right there with Biggie, everything felt like a normal LA night. Girls on the sidewalks, music in the air, no sign of danger, no tension.
A car just rolled up, started popping in the car. Didn't say nothing.
Then shots fast, loud, and when they looked over, Biggie wasn't moving. Gene Deal, the man who helped carry Biggie's body into the emergency room, revealed something so brutal it silenced an entire courtroom. He pissed on himself, Gene said. That one statement ripped away the illusion that this was just rap beef or street politics. This wasn't about music, it was a cold, calculated murder for hire. And now, nearly 30 years later, one of the men involved says he's done hiding. He's ready to tell everything. So why speak now? Why wait almost 3 decades to admit to murder? It's simple. He got tired of running. The anonymous hitman, still unnamed due to witness protection, filed for a plea deal in exchange for immunity from unrelated charges. In a signed affidavit obtained by investigators, he laid it all out. He admitted to being paid, pointed to Wardell Poochie Faust as the shooter, and named a second man who helped set it all up. That second man, he was the lookout. He cleared the path, made sure nothing stood in the way. So, I was in the car. I watched Poochie raise the piece. He didn't hesitate. He said, "It's done." And we dipped, the hitman confessed. But here's the twist. The lookout is still free. No arrest, no charges. The only reason we even know he exists is because the confession dropped a street nickname, one tied to several police-documented fights in Compton. So why hasn't law enforcement moved in? Because the confession isn't official just yet. Investigators are still digging, cross-referencing the claims. But sources say, if it checks out, this could finally lead to charges, including a potential case against Suge Knight himself. Meanwhile, Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, is still standing tall. For more than a decade, she fought the LAPD. She took them to court, accusing the department of failing her son. She spent millions trying to uncover the truth, but again and again, she hit brick walls. The LAPD, she claimed, was more concerned with protecting its image than solving her son's murder. Greg Kading, the ex-detective who helped expose the truth, didn't hold back. He said the LAPD fought hard just to keep the Wallace family's lawsuit from moving forward. They refused to settle. They refused to admit fault. They just wanted the whole thing to disappear. And yet, through it all, the public has kept asking the same question. Who really pulled the trigger? Well, now we know, but there's more. The hitman didn't just confess to Biggie's murder. He claimed it was only the beginning. According to him, Biggie was a test run. There was another hit being planned. Another East Coast rapper lined up as the next target. The plan was in motion, but was called off at the last second. Too many witnesses, too much heat. So who was next on the list? That's coming up. But what we can tell you is this. The conspiracy goes deeper than anyone thought. It connects Death Row Records, the LAPD, and a top-secret surveillance file that never saw the light of day. A file the feds buried. Feds knew. Files vanished. Biggie was just the start. This was never just about one man. It was about power. Silencing artists who had gotten too rich, too loud, and too influential. And the cover-up didn't stop at the crime scene. It reached into the very system that was supposed to protect Biggie, into FBI files that suddenly disappeared, into a second assassination attempt that nearly happened just days later. Let's talk about the list. During the Wallace family's lawsuit, an internal LAPD memo was leaked, one that mentioned a hit list targeting major East Coast rappers. The list included Biggie, Nas, Busta Rhymes, and one more name that was redacted. And this wasn't some conspiracy theory, it was entered into court as part of a discovery motion. Real documents, real testimony. And yet somehow, LAPD and FBI files related to the case just vanished. A former informant testified that Nas was supposed to be hit next, right after Biggie. The plan was to strike during one of his West Coast tour dates, but Nas pulled out, reportedly due to security concerns. Just like that, the plan unraveled and the trail went cold again. Until now, the hitman revealed that months after Biggie's murder, the same people who orchestrated it approached him again. They wanted him to handle the Nas hit. He turned them down, said he'd done his part and was out. Now that testimony is under review by federal agents, and it might reopen a full investigation into a much bigger conspiracy targeting East Coast talent. This wasn't a turf war. This was about business, control, territory. While the world was watching award shows and music videos behind the scenes, West Coast moguls felt threatened. Puff Daddy was dominating. Biggie was announcing Junior MAFIA's next album. Bad Boy was on fire. Meanwhile, Death Row was falling apart. Suge was in prison. Pac was gone. Dr. Dre had left. Snoop was slipping away. Death Row was bleeding power, and someone wanted to flip the board. They thought killing Biggie would scare the East, but it backfired. And Biggie's death didn't silence the game. It lit a fire. Voletta Wallace came with everything she had. She sued. She hired private investigators. She tracked down leads. She forced the LAPD to answer questions. But there was one person they could never reach, Poochie Faust. In 2003, Poochie was gunned down in Compton, 10 shots while riding his motorcycle. LAPD called it gang-related, but many believe it was a cleanup job. A message. One investigator said, people were getting nervous. He knew too much. And with Poochie gone, things went quiet until 2024. That's when the anonymous hitman stepped up. Now, the silence is broken and the truth is finally crawling into the light. But what about Puff? Puff Daddy, now Diddy, has spent decades dodging lawsuits, whispers, and conspiracy theories. To some, he's just another victim of the chaos that surrounded Biggie's death. But others, they say he played both sides of the chessboard. What's undeniable is this. After Biggie was gone, Puff controlled the story. He dropped, I'll Be Missing You. He turned Bad Boy into a cultural empire. He built $1 billion legacy. But those who were close, they say it came at a massive price.
And to see that kid go out like that, when he has so much love, man.
Gene Deal, Puff's former head of security, was eventually cut loose, not for failure, but for telling the truth. And that's always been at the heart of this case. Truth. Biggie was just 24 years old when he was killed. He left behind 2 kids and a mother who still wakes up searching for answers. Now, nearly 30 years later, she might finally have them. So where do things stand today? Here's what we know. The anonymous hitman has confessed under oath. 2 co-conspirators were named. One of them dead, the other still walking free. Suge Knight's girlfriend was granted full immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Nas was allegedly the next name on a hit list. And as for Suge, still behind bars and still refusing to say a word. When a reporter asked him recently if he knew who shot Biggie, Suge smirked and said, ask Puffy. But now people have stopped asking because the answers are finally falling into place. And here's one last twist. Before he died, Biggie recorded one final track, one that never made it on to Life After Death. The label buried it, said it was too raw. In that unreleased song, Biggie reportedly referenced a black truck creeping outside the club the night he died. At the time, fans thought it was just another lyric. But now, it feels like a warning. I just want the truth, Voletta Wallace said in a 2023 interview. And now, maybe, just maybe, she's getting it. The hitman who pulled the trigger said it himself. I didn't know him. I didn't hate him. I was just doing what I was paid to do. Now he'll carry that weight forever. Did Biggie know he was being hunted? Christopher Wallace wasn't naive. He wasn't reckless. And by all signs, he wasn't surprised when the shots came. The deeper you look into those final days, the clearer it gets. Biggie saw the storm coming. He talked about it. He joked about it. He lived with it. In one of his final interviews, March 5th, 1997, on the Doghouse Show in San Francisco, he said something that hits different now.
Especially if it's your money, right. It's only right you know everything.
Everyone laughed. Biggie smiled, but his voice, it dropped. His tone shifted. He was tired, worn down. The host picked up on it and asked what had changed in the rap game, why things were getting so dangerous. Biggie gave a chilling reply, calm and direct like he'd rehearsed it. He wasn't being poetic, he meant it. He felt like a target, and not just from rivals or haters, but from people who wanted a piece of his empire. Because by 97, Biggie wasn't just a rapper. He was a machine. He and Puff were working on Junior MAFIA's second album. He was launching his own clothing line. He was setting up his own imprint under Bad Boy. That kind of independence, it made him dangerous, not just to Suge Knight or the streets, but to execs, gatekeepers, and behind-the-scenes players who didn't want him in control. There's even a piece of an interview that never made national TV. When asked what advice he'd give younger artists about the industry, Biggie said,
oh yeah, I got a song with Too Short.
But that's on the album?
He wasn't talking about rhymes, he was talking about ownership, publishing, legacy. According to close friends, Biggie had started working with a private legal team to restructure his publishing deals. He wanted out of the trap. And this was before people even knew what a 360 deal was. Guess who owned a large chunk of Biggie's catalog? Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Sources from inside Bad Boy claim Biggie was preparing to shift creative rights to a trust for his kids. No one from Diddy's camp has confirmed this publicly, but insiders suggest that's why some tracks were shelved or buried after Biggie's death. There's even talk of unreleased sessions with DJ Premier, fully recorded songs that were left off the final Life After Death track list.
That was the problem that I made. I married her, but she just had a baby for me and we trying to work it.
And then there's Faith Evans. The headlines were messy, marriage, infidelity, tension, but behind closed doors, Biggie was trying to clean things up. In those final weeks, he was reportedly trying trying to patch things up, trying to build something stable. In that same Doghouse interview, Biggie admitted that wasn't just a moment of honesty, it was about legacy. Biggie wanted peace, he wanted time, but he didn't get it. Let's rewind to the last night, the party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. There's one witness account that rarely gets mentioned. The party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. Everyone remembers the flashing lights, the music, the stars. But there's one witness, barely quoted, whose account changes everything. Michelle, a staffer working VIP check-in that night, told investigators Biggie wasn't just hanging out, he was nervous. He kept asking who just came in, who's outside, who left, she said. It wasn't paranoia, it was awareness. He knew something was off. Michelle also said Biggie requested extra security outside his SUV before leaving. But instead of backup, he got brushed off. They told him it was fine, safe. But he didn't feel safe. He didn't feel heard. And he definitely didn't feel protected. He wasn't reassured. He was overruled. Here's another twist almost no one talks about. Biggie switched hotels just 2 days before he was murdered. Originally, he was staying at the Four Seasons, but suddenly, he was moved to the Beverly Hills Hotel. The official story, a booking issue. But insiders are now saying it was something else, a threatening phone call. Someone from Biggie's own entourage said he answered the call, barely spoke, nodded quietly, and then told the crew, "We're moving." The number, unlisted. The caller, never identified. The threat, real. And that wasn't the only warning. Big Gene, Eugene Deal, Puff's former bodyguard, gave a chilling account years later. In a separate interview, Deal said, "When we left that party, I was scanning every rooftop. We knew somebody was watching. We just didn't know who." Gene's instincts were right. His trauma still eats at him. He said, "I hate to be like that because it's hard to come back from that." And honestly, he never really did. So what does this all mean? Biggie knew he wasn't being reckless or dramatic. He was making moves, giving warnings, shifting locations, asking questions, and still, they got him. When he died, it wasn't just bullets that took him down. It was silence. The silencing of one of the most powerful voices in hip-hop. Unreleased tracks, gone, private deals, vanished, conversations that could have changed his legacy, wiped out. This wasn't just a murder, it was an erasure. Why does that still matter? Because when voices get silenced, history starts lying. And Biggie's voice, though gone, left behind breadcrumbs in his bars, in his interviews, in how he moved. He told us everything. The question is, were we paying attention? Christopher Wallace didn't predict the exact night or the exact street, but make no mistake, he knew. He saw the walls closing in. And now, 27 years later, the rest of the world is just starting to see it too. Not because the police did their job, not because the music industry demanded justice, but because of one woman, his mother, who never gave up. And now, with this confession on the record and the truth finally starting to line up, maybe Biggie can finally rest. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you on the next one.